It's not a secret that the U.S. intelligence organization, the CIA, has overthrown many foreign governments. Here are 5 of the subtle and not so subtle ways it's done it. The first thing the CIA will usually try is funding the opposition. This is the safest and easiest method for the CIA. It can be as simple as giving money to opposition groups or as complicated as supporting a military coup. And it happened in South Vietnam in 1963. Similar instances happened in Brazil and Guatemala. Declassified documents show how the CIA supported the coup plotters, namely Vietnamese generals, to oust the country's leader, Ngo Dinh Diem. Number 2. Assassination. Killing leaders to install a US-approved party is another option. The CIA continuously tried to assassinate the democratically elected leader of the Congo, Patrice Lumumba. They succeeded in 1961. But public support for Lumumba was so high that they couldn't put his opponent in power. What followed was 4 years of political chaos. 3. Destroying the economy, or economic assassination. By using overt and covert means to destroy the target country's financial system, like embargoes, the US can force a political party to crumble. This strategy was used against Chile in the 1970s. After Salvador Allende's unyielding policy of nationalizing the country's major industries continued, much to the disapproval of the US government, President Richard Nixon told the CIA to, quote, "make the economy scream." The agency also worked with 3 Chilean groups which planned a coup against Allende. The US constantly worked to undermine the Chilean economy until General Augusto Pinochet replaced Allende in a military coup in 1973. Number 4. Media takeover. The CIA will buy and use newspapers, TV, and radio stations to change public opinion and push anti-government rhetoric. This is what it did in Rome, Italy in the mid-20th century. The CIA bought and owned 40% of the Rome Daily American, initially to keep it from falling into communist control. But a former CIA official later said, quote, "it's easier to buy a reporter, which we've done, than to buy a newspaper." And the agency has kept many American and foreign journalists on its payroll. Number 5. Creating chaos. Causing panic among the people and creating social tensions through street protests is another way the agency has overthrown governments. And making sure the protesters don't know the real motives are also key. The fact that Iran's democratically elected leader Mohammad Mossadegh nationalized an Iranian oil industry previously operated by British companies was not very welcome by the US and the UK. The 2 countries instigated a coup to overthrow him in 1953, mainly through the efforts of the CIA. To throw Mossadegh out, millions of dollars were channeled into Tehran to buy off his supporters and finance street protests. The result? Mossadegh ended up living the rest of his life under house arrest. This is what we do know about the secretive organization. But who knows what we don't know?
This is the cutting edge. And I refer me there with you next Wednesday night. Going to be a wonderful program tonight. Yes. Yes, we see things are eat up in Venezuela. It's very, very weird place to eat up, because them places are almost like next door, But once again, it's a long time, them really after Venezuela, from Chavez. Remember, Chavez never did like Bush, and him say Obama sell out, him dead, next one come. So them want us to believe that them is guardians of morality and truths and rights. And one of the big things is that them have a big argument about meddling in people's affair, other countries' affair. We see we are going now with them and Russia and Trump and all them something there where them say Russia meddling in the affairs of America. But we see them are meddling in the affairs of Venezuela. And you know that Venezuela is a highly rich country. Highly rich, say Anyway, the oil there, America there, you know. All of the country them where you see them attack of oil. We are talking about Iraq, we are talking about Syria, we are talking about, well now, Venezuela, we are talking about Iran. All of the places them is oil-rich countries. And the problem with it is that all of the countries them where them invade, it never turn out good for them yet. Like Libya, Iraq, Iran, you name the country, there's not one country that America invade or get involved with the political ideas of the country and then you see it turn out good. Not one. Not one. Them used to where the brother with them Bin Laden, them used to Bin Laden against Russia, and then it turned out bad for them. The Shah of Iran, all of these things turn out bad for you. Talk about Nicaragua, El Salvador, you name it. All of the countries them America get involved with, never yet work out, never. So now it's Venezuela time. Venezuela time, and them would want us to believe that the things is terrible. Yet them talk about democracy. How can you talk of democracy when you just decide externally who is the president of the country? You are going to decide who is the president of a country and then say you believe in a democracy. That's unbelievable, man. That's totally unbelievable. But we're going to see what's going to happen, because they must say no gold, no oil, must leave the shores of Venezuela. Yet till you see the Russians, them a pack up a big ship down there with gold and oil. I don't know what them are going to do now. I don't know if them are going to attack the Russian ship, Russian plane. But the Russian them claim to them send 2 planes go down there where travel twice the speed of sound. Twice the speed of sound. And we see Jamaica and they be clear so, because Jamaica I try to take over the oil company. Them I try to take over the oil company, them call it compulsory acquisition. May I tell you. Meanwhile, back in Chicago, we are told that between now and Thursday, the temperature in Chicago will be like the Antarctica. And we see that people now in America is dying, especially the people them who's what you call homeless because of the cold. I mean, people finger literally a drop off. Finger a drop off of them, the way the thing cold. The coldness go right up to England, where them say between now and Friday is the worst, one of the worst chill them are going to feel. And now we see it reaching at Chicago and in America, where the place so cold that why tourism supposed to get big down here. So I tell you, tourism supposed to get big. It's like how when we have hurricane and it devastate the whole country and people are say, boy, them glad to them not live at Jamaica because of the hurricane, them will leak down at Jamaica. Well, I want to tell you, say, them supposed to sorry to them there America right now because the cold up there. So now, believe you me, it's horrible. But we are continuing the journey. This is the Cutting Edge, and I refer you there with you right up until 2 o'clock. We're there with you. So we are talking about Venezuela a while ago because we're going to hear that's not the news regular. We're going to hear that the news enough. This is the beginning of the year, and this is the outcome of years of building up to get out the oil out of Venezuela. Them have the largest oil reserve in the world, even more than Saudi Arabia. And this is the way them going to get out the oil now. because them claim say the government is not legitimate and is a dictatorship government. So them now decide, them now go and decide that the opposition is the legitimate government based upon what them a say. And them call now say it's democracy them a deal with. We see these things happen continuously. It repeats itself continuously as it relates to these people. But you know, them so good must overcome evil, and even though it look long and drawn out, like them are going to win all the while, but can't go so all the while. It can't go so all the while. Yeah, this is the Cutting Edge on RFM. We want to do this.
Just like that, Venezuela's got a new president. Was he elected? Nope. But after swearing himself in, Juan Guaido was recognized as a legit president of Venezuela by Trump, Canada, and a bunch of right-wing Latin American countries allied with the U.S. Apparently, appointing yourself president is all it takes. But for real, what's happening in Venezuela is a straight-up coup against that country's democratically elected leader, Nicolas Maduro. And it's creating the dangerous conditions for a civil war, with several people already reported dead. My God, 1 week it's Syria, today it's Venezuela, next week it's Iran. Pick a damn country, America. It's pretty amazing that the same country that spent 2 years screaming about alleged Russian election meddling in 2016 is now applauding U.S. meddling in Venezuela. But if you're watching U.S. corporate news media, you would have no idea the U.S. is meddling. They label Maduro a dictator and insist that all Venezuelans support the people that the U.S. wants in power.
Maduro dictatorship, a dictator with no legitimate claim to power.
It has been a disaster on all counts.
What they leave out is that there are millions of people in Venezuela who voted for and support Maduro's government.
Aquí está el pueblo de Venezuela, aquí está el pueblo de Caracas, marchando en defensa de la revolución, en defensa de la democracia, no a la intervención imperialista.
Que nadie votó por esa persona. Nadie votó. Yo voté por Maduro. Mi voto es por Maduro.
But these people have been made invisible by an American corporate media that's been giddy over the prospect of a right-wing takeover of Venezuela for decades. So much so that they recognize the legitimacy of a dude who just up and declared himself president and are calling that democracy. The U.S. has been trying to overthrow the Venezuelan government since Hugo Chavez became president in 1999. Chavez redistributed wealth to the poor and used the country's oil resources to fund social programs, which pissed off the country's elites. He also tried to unite the region against U.S. economic dominance and made it difficult for the U.S. to profit off of Venezuela's oil reserves, which are the largest reserves in the world. That's right, where there's a coup, there's almost always oil. As far as U.S. imperialism is concerned, countries aren't allowed to be socialist, let alone forge their own paths independent of U.S. interests. That's why the U.S. has repeatedly attempted to overthrow the government and has sanctioned the hell out of Venezuela, strangling its economy and depriving average Venezuelans of access to basic necessities, like life-saving medications. And then the trolls come along and say, see, socialism doesn't work. Well, the problem isn't socialism, it's sabotage. In 2002, George W. Bush succeeded in facilitating a right-wing coup in Venezuela, but it only lasted 2 days because Chavez had the overwhelming support of the country's people as well as the military. Ever since then, both Democrats and Republicans, as well as America's corporate media outlets, have been salivating at the chance to replace Venezuela's government with a right-wing regime that's friendly to American corporate interests. That's one reason why they characterize Venezuela's leadership as a dictatorship, even though their leaders are democratically elected in elections that take place regularly. Nicolas Maduro was democratically elected last May in an election that the U.S.-backed opposition boycotted and has continued to challenge after he was sworn into office. Venezuela's U.S.-backed opposition likes to portray itself as democratic and progressive, but the opposition-controlled National Assembly, led by the self-declared coup president Juan Guaido, drafted a transition law that lays out his plan for large-scale privatization of state assets and a free market economic system that promotes property rights and freedom of enterprise. In other words, a return to an exploitative capitalist model that privileges private corporations and the rich. This is why U.S. claims that it's concerned about Venezuelan human rights are laughable. I mean, mean, do you really expect anyone to believe that the same country that's BFFs with absolute monarchs who chop up dissidents with bone saws gives two shits about freedom and democracy in Venezuela? And look at America's friends in the region. It's not like they're paragons of democracy. The U.S. has no complaints about Brazil's new fascist president, Bolsonaro, or the right-wing leadership that put in power in Honduras that kills environmental activists. You know, Honduras, where the U.S. backed a coup in 2009 that plunged the country into chaos, causing tens of thousands of unaccompanied Honduran children to flee for their lives to the U.S. This, of course, empowered the anti-immigrant far-right in the U.S. We could see the same thing happen in Venezuela, with another wave of refugees that will fuel the far-right even more. The point is, the U.S. does not care about human rights of Venezuelans, nor does it care about democracy. It cares about oil. It cares about economically controlling the region. It's about imperialism, stupid. The self-appointed president, Juan Guaido, may have been recognized as legitimate by the U.S. and its right-wing allies in the region, like Brazil and Colombia, but this coup was also rejected by the region's left-wing governments, including Mexico, Bolivia, Nicaragua, and Cuba. The high military command in Venezuela is also standing by Maduro, but the situation remains incredibly dangerous. Even if the U.S.'s guide doesn't get to take over Venezuela, this is going to incite violence and possibly a civil war. As for those opposed to Maduro, fine, you don't have to love him, but it's not up to the U.S. or anyone else to decide Venezuela's future. After all, when has U.S. meddling ever ended well for the people in the targeted country? Honduras, Syria, Iraq, and Libya are just a handful of a long, long list of countries that are worse off after U.S. meddling. The result is always more oppression, more authoritarianism, more violence, more misery, more privatization, more corporate exploitation, and more poverty. Every single time. And this time around won't be any different.
Why are the people starving? Because the rulers eat up the money in taxes. Therefore, the people are starving. Why are the people rebellious? Because the rulers interfere too much. Therefore, they are rebellious. Why do the people think so little of death? Because the rulers demand too much of life. Therefore, the people take death lightly. Having little to live on, one knows better than to value life too much.
The Britain we know today was built with slave money. Ports, cities and canals. Even the Church of England has admitted making money from the slave business. By the 19th century, a fifth of the British elite had made their fortunes from slavery. Among them, David Cameron's distant cousin, General Sir James Duff. The Liverpool merchants who founded what's now Barclays Bank were slave traders. In 1833, when slavery was abolished, slave owners were paid £20 million in compensation for their loss of property. That's £2 billion today. More than 10 million people died as a direct result of the Atlantic slave trade. But the survivors got nothing. West Africa, nothing. Now 15 Caribbean states, including Jamaica, have launched the first united campaign for reparations from Britain, France and Holland. They have suggested compensation equal to the sum offered to slave owners in the 1830s, £2 billion. They also want an apology,
Don't blush.
recognition of the historic atrocity.
They hid in caves. My great-grandmother was born in a cave to make sure that she was not born as a slave. And that is what Britain perpetuated.
But the British government has refused to give either. David Cameron's first official visit to Jamaica has amplified calls on Britain to agree to reparations. Some argue that if Britain did pay, it wouldn't be the elite footing the bill but the tax-paying working classes. Others have said this was 200 years ago, it's in the past, why should I pay now? In Jamaica, slavery was followed with a century of colonialism.
Most of the land is still in the hands of Europeans.
When the Brits left in 1962, 80% of the population were functionally illiterate. Male literacy remains 4 points below the global average. 19% of the country live in poverty. When historic crimes have generational victims, who should pay?
Basically, slavery and genocide has impacted not only the historical populations that were kidnapped from Africa but also those of us who are the descendants of the enslaved today. And it's not only about trauma and multi-generational oppression. The whole discussion around wealth. There has been unjust enrichment to Britain, and there's also been unjust impoverishment, which has been passed on throughout the generations. So part of the legacy is this huge inequality that we see today between the descendants of the enslavers and the descendants of the enslaved.
And what about and psychological scars which have had societal effects, ongoing economic effects, to which you've already said? What are the psychological scars?
Well, part of that
intergenerationally,
it's not knowing who we are. It's a lack of connection. It's a lack of identity, a lack of nationhood, which is what makes us human beings, essentially. It's not being rooted. It's being considered minority populations when we come from global majorities. And it's about having second-class status and citizenship wherever we have been located as a result of this dispersal and depopulation that happened originally in Africa.
And there is a phenomenon as well that you believe really does exist, which is post-traumatic slave syndrome.
Yes, well, it's something that I've not coined, but many of our social theorists and psychologists and psychiatrists have been looking at some of the negative legacies that we have internalized, the internalization of racism, self-hate, anti-African sentiments and prejudice and discrimination, a loathing of ourselves, vacant esteem. Self-loathing in terms of not being proud of who we are, not being proud of our heritage, not being proud of our African ancestry, changing our looks to kind of emulate Caucasian beauty ideals. These are some of the real legacies today in terms of the psychology. We also have to look at the rates of mental health illness, and this has also been linked to that. All roots back to slavery. All roots back to that.
This is the cutting edge on RFM. They have pass information. That's all you can do. Pass information. If you want to accept it, you accept it. If you don't want to accept it, show it to you. I just say it works.
You certainly make your case for the legitimacy of what you're doing very well.
Let's take a look at some of the things which Lewis Wolf had to say, and we'll let you comment ever so often on this, okay?
What, in the years that you've been publishing it, do you think are some of your most significant revelations? Are there some stories that even shocked you?
Well, I think one of the big stories that we were able to document in some detail was the whole scope of CIA activities, similar to what the CIA did in Chile, and which was documented by the Senate Select Committee, was the whole covert action program in Jamaica in between 1976 and 1980. And we did a great deal of research into that, and we discovered in many ways, a very similar program, almost a classic model that was followed along the lines of what they did in Chile, including three major categories: military, paramilitary activity, the use of propaganda in the media, and the third one, which was economic warfare, using the multilateral organizations, the International Monetary Fund and others, to withhold loans which had been promised to the Jamaican government. This is one example.
What are a couple more of the details of that? You particularly mentioned those first two examples of actual paramilitary activity the CIA was involved in Jamaica.
There was a fire, for example, that took place in Jamaica of an old people's home. I think 150 old and infirmed women, many of them blind, were living in this home. And as it turned out, the place burned down in the space of about 8 minutes, 7 or 8 minutes. It was discovered that the phone wires had been cut and that their exits had all been blocked. Even those who could see their way out could not get out. And that the means by which the fire was set was the use of a petroleum jelly, which was unavailable in Jamaica. This was one indication, among others, that there was outside help. Why would the CIA, you might ask, why would the CIA want to murder 150 old women? It was because it was an effort, part of a very large-scale effort to discredit the government in Jamaica, which was at the time headed by Michael Manley, the Prime Minister. There were images produced of Michael Manley in the media, in the Daily Gleaner, which was the newspaper which the United States, through the CIA, helped to support. And there is a good deal of evidence of that. There were images of Michael Manley showing a death mask. I mean, it was his face which had been somehow made to look like a death mask, although it was pretending to be a photograph of him. And there were many ways to try and discredit him. This is very, very similar, in fact, to what the CIA did to try and discredit Salvador Allende in Chile. If you remember, Richard Nixon instructed the CIA in a meeting which was in 1970 in the White House, and there was a document in the Senate report which is reprinted, and he said, "Make the economy scream." Those were his words. And that's, of course, what the CIA proceeded to do in Chile, and that's what they also did in Jamaica.
They also furnished a lot of munitions and assistance to the terrorist squads that were going around killing people in the cities and also in the countryside in Jamaica as well.
That's correct.
Well, John, you had a trip down to Jamaica, and you saw a lot of these things about Jamaica with your own eyes, right?
Yes, indeed. A very moving, a very interesting trip to me to see a target country at a time in the height of a CIA operation when I was completely outside. So there's no way that I could see the problem that journalists have always had when the U.S. government was targeting on a country in a situation, trying to destabilize it, overthrow, or manipulate the elections or whatever, of trying to figure out what's going on when you don't have access to all of the flow of cables and the discussions in National Security Council meetings and whatnot for the planning. I observed that from published information, the CIA station there was quite large for that size of the country. It was huge, in fact. It was bigger than any station I knew of in Africa, although Jamaica was a fairly small island with 2 million people. That's typical of when the CIA has got a big operation going in a place. They beef up the station and beef up the offices back stateside. The tone and flow of articles in the Gleaner was, of course, as Lou says, definitely a chapter out of Chile or a chapter out of the Angolan operation. Every indication of a massive CIA operation going to destabilize the government, to make the economy scream. And in that case, I would say that probably someone got promoted for that one, probably several people.
Because Manley was run out of office.
Because it worked.
By a legitimate...
Yeah, without a scandal, without an assassination, without the things that have caused the CIA so much grief, Manley, a champion of social democracy, of giving the people a piece of the pie, was thrown out of office, and an arch-capitalist was put in office. And again, there was minimal adverse publicity. Lou Wolf and the others were studying the situation and did publish about what was going on, but it was not published in the New York Times and the Washington Post, and the big television networks didn't do studies on it, primarily because even if the journalists of the big organs knew what was happening and might have wanted to, they really just, because of the secrecy, couldn't get the truth about what the United States was doing. One interesting thing was that the effectiveness of the liars in our government, the duplicity. When we formed the CIA, we committed our leaders to having two policies, as Lou says, the rhetoric, the public statements, and the truth about what United States policy is. So an interesting measure of presidents is how effectively they lie. Interesting discussions that occur inside the CIA is about lying. Would you lie? You're the DDO and you're going to testify to the Senate. And serious discussions. Are you going to lie? Because if you do, it's perjury and there's a chance you could go to jail. And yet, the organization expects you to lie. President Carter was one of the most effective liars I have ever watched on television and through the media. As a poker player, man, I would never go up against that man. He could look at that camera and say things that obviously he knew were completely and totally false. And I would study his expression, and I could detect nothing except occasionally a little wisp of a smile that wasn't consistent with what he was saying, like he thought it was funny. But one of his more classic
tick, actually.
Well, the smile that I was referring to wasn't that. It was just a kind of like he was repressing a grin, like he thought it was funny. How he rationalized these things, I don't know. But one of his most conspicuous lies was when he sat down with Manley just a few weeks before the elections in Washington and told him face to face that the CIA, don't have the CIA doing anything to destabilize you or your government. We have no such program going. And obviously he did. And he pulled it off to the point where even Manley was troubled. Very effective lie.
This is the Cutting Edge on RFM where we're playing these clips because a lot of them have a course, a direction, and the one we just played a while ago is the destabilization of Jamaica in the 70s by the CIA. And it's very interesting, the man mentioned about Chile and all the same formula them use. I was using in Chile, the same formula them using in Jamaica. Well, Venezuela is on the lips now, on the tip of everybody's tongue as it relates to how America is going to show them colors now as it relates to invasion, not invasion of planes and ships, but economical invasion. And this is all about the oil. This is not about, well, it's all about oil and the kind of government. And you know, America don't like no other government more than the government that tore the line of America. And that was why you hear the man talk about Michael Manley government a while ago. Michael Manley government was too near to Castro, who was the number one enemy of America in this region here. And them couldn't get out Castro. And them couldn't couldn't afford for our next country like Cuba rise up in the Caribbean, so like Jamaica especially. So they had to destabilize the country. All the people don't want to accept it. That Jamaica was destabilized by the CIA, and that is proof there where we just write of people who actually was involved in the destabilization. So when we come to Venezuela now, we see Venezuela is on the tip now, and a lot of things going to happen in Venezuela. People going to die in Venezuela. You're going to hear about dictatorship in Venezuela. You're going to hear about no democracy in Venezuela. And then you're going to hear about who have the oil, who are the owner for the oil, according to my brethren. Who are the owner for the oil, because that is really what them is all about now. It's not just not being a democratic country. It's about who are the owner for the oil. That is really what it's about.
You certainly make your case for the legitimacy of what you're doing very well.
Let's take a look at some of the things which Lewis Wolf had to say, and we'll let you comment ever so often on this, okay?
What, in the years that you've been publishing it, do you think are some of your most significant revelations? Are there some stories that even shocked you?
Well, I think one of the big stories that we were able to document in some detail was the whole scope of CIA activities similar to what the CIA did in Chile, and which was documented by the Senate Select Committee, was the whole covert action program in Jamaica in between 1976 and 1980. And we did a great deal of research into that, and we discovered in many ways, a very similar program, almost a classic model that was followed along the lines of what they did in Chile, including three major categories: military, paramilitary activity, the use of propaganda in the media, and the third one, which was economic warfare, using the multilateral organizations, the International Monetary Fund and others, to withhold loans which had been promised to the Jamaican government. This is one example.
What are a couple more of the details of that? Particularly, you mentioned those first two examples of actual paramilitary activity the CIA was involved in Jamaica.
There was a fire, for example, that took place in Jamaica of an old people's home. I think 150 old and infirmed women, many of them blind, were living in this home. And as it turned out, the place burned down in the space of about 8 minutes, 7 or 8 minutes. It was discovered that the phone wires had been cut and that their exits had all been blocked. Even those who could see their way out could not get out. And that the means by which the fire was set was the use of a petroleum jelly, which was unavailable in Jamaica. This was one indication, among others, that there was outside help. Why would the CIA, you might ask, why would the CIA want to murder 150 old women? It was because it was an effort, part of a very large-scale effort to discredit the government in Jamaica, which was at the time headed by Michael Manley, the Prime Minister. There were images produced of Michael Manley in the media, in the Daily Gleaner, which was the newspaper which the United States, through the CIA, helped to support. And there is a good deal of evidence of that. There were images of Michael Manley showing a death mask. I mean, it was his face which had been somehow made to look like a death mask, although it was pretending to be a photograph of him. And there were many ways to try and discredit him. This is very, very similar, in fact, to what the CIA did to try and discredit Salvador Allende in Chile. If you remember, Richard Nixon instructed the CIA in a meeting which was in 1970 in the White House, and there was a document in the Senate report which is reprinted, and he said, "Make the economy scream." Those were his words. And that's, of course, what the CIA proceeded to do in Chile, and that's what they also did in Jamaica.
They also furnished a lot of munitions and assistance to the terrorist squads that were going around killing people in the cities and also in the countryside in Jamaica as well.
That's correct.
Well, John, you had a trip down to Jamaica, and you saw a lot of these things about Jamaica with your own eyes, right?
Yes, indeed. A very moving, a very interesting trip to me to see a target country at a time in the height of a CIA operation when I was completely outside. So there's no way that I could see the problem that journalists have always had when the U.S. government was targeting on a country in a situation, trying to destabilize it, overthrow, or manipulate the elections or whatever, of trying to figure out what's going on when you don't have access to all of the flow of cables and the discussions in National Security Council meetings and whatnot for the planning. I observed that from published information, the CIA station there was quite large for that size of the country. It was huge, in fact. It was bigger than any station I knew of in Africa, although Jamaica was a fairly small island with 2 million people. That's typical of when the CIA has got a big operation going in a place, they beef up the station and beef up the offices back stateside. The tone and flow of articles in the Gleaner was, of course, as Lou says, definitely a chapter out of Chile or a chapter out of the Angolan operation. Every indication of a massive CIA operation going to destabilize the government, to make the economy scream. And in that case, I would say that probably someone got promoted for that one, probably several people.
Because Manley was run out of office
support.
By a legitimate...
Yeah, without a scandal, without an assassination, without the things that have caused the CIA so much grief, Manley, a champion of social democracy, of giving the people a piece of the pie, was thrown out of office, and an arch-capitalist was put in office. And again, there was minimal adverse publicity. Lew Wolf and the others were studying the situation and did publish about what was going on, but it was not published in the New York Times and the Washington Post, and the big television networks didn't do studies on it, primarily because even if the journalists of the big organs knew what was happening and might have wanted to, they really just, because of the secrecy, couldn't get the truth about what the United States was doing. One interesting thing was that the effectiveness of the liars in our government, the duplicity. When we formed the CIA, we committed our leaders to having two policies as loose as the rhetoric, the public statements, and the truth about what United States policy is. So an interesting measure of presidents is how effectively they lie. Interesting discussions that occur inside the CIA is about lying. Would you lie? You're the DDO and you're going to testify to the Senate. And serious discussions. Are you going to lie? Because if you do, it's perjury and there's a chance you could go to jail. And yet, the organization expects you to lie. President Carter was one of the most effective liars I have ever watched on television and through the media. As a poker player, man, I would never go up against that man. He could look at that camera and say things that obviously he knew were completely and totally false. And I would study his expression and I could detect nothing except occasionally a little wisp of a smile that wasn't consistent with what he was saying. Like he thought it was funny. But one of his more classic
tick, actually.
Yeah, well, the smile that I was referring to wasn't that. It was just a kind of like he was repressing a grin, like he thought it was funny. How he rationalized these things, I don't know. But one of his most conspicuous lies was when he sat down with Manley just a few weeks before the elections in Washington and told him face to face that the CIA, don't have the CIA doing anything to destabilize you or your government. We have no such program going. And obviously he did. And he pulled it off to the point where even Manley was troubled. Very effective lie.
This is the Cutting Edge on RFM where we're playing these clips because all of them have a course, a direction, and the one we just played a while ago is the destabilization of Jamaica in the 70s by the CIA. And it's very interesting, the man mentioned about Chile and all the same formula them use. I was using in Chile, the same formula them using in Jamaica. Well, Venezuela is on the lips now, on the tip of everybody's tongue as it relates to how America is going to show them colors now as it relates to invasion, not invasion of planes and ships, but economical invasion. And this is all about the oil. This is not about, well, it's all about oil and the kind of government. And America don't like no other government more than the government that tore the line of America. And that was why you hear the man talk about Michael Mann, the government a while ago. Michael Mann, the government was too near to Castro, who was the number one enemy of America in this region, yeah. And them couldn't get out Castro. And them couldn't couldn't afford for our next country like Cuba rise up in the Caribbean, so like Jamaica especially. So they had to destabilize the country. All people don't want to accept it. That Jamaica was destabilized by the CIA, and that is proof there where we just write of people who actually was involved in the destabilization. So when we come to Venezuela now, we see Venezuela is on the tip now, and a lot of things going to happen in Venezuela. People going to die in Venezuela. You're going to hear about dictatorship in Venezuela. You're going to hear about no democracy in Venezuela. And then you're going to hear about who have the oil, who are the owner for the oil, according to my brethren. Who are the owner for the oil, because that is really what them is all about now. It's not just not being a democratic country. It's about who are the owner for the oil. That is really what it's about.
You certainly make your case for the legitimacy of what you're doing very well.
Let's take a look at some of the things which Lewis Wolf had to say, and we'll let you comment ever so often on this, okay?
What, in the years that you've been publishing it, do you think are some of your most significant revelations? Are there some stories that even shocked you?
Well, I think one of the big stories that we were able to document in some detail was the whole scope of CIA activities, similar to what the CIA did in Chile, and which was documented by the Senate Select Committee, was the whole covert action program in Jamaica in between 1976 and 1980. And we did a great deal of research into that, and we discovered in many ways, a very similar program, almost a classic model that was followed along the lines of what they did in Chile, including three major categories: military, paramilitary activity, the use of propaganda in the media, and the third one, which was economic warfare, using the multilateral organizations, the International Monetary Fund and others, to withhold loans which had been promised to the Jamaican government. This is one example.
What are a couple more of the details of that? Particularly, you mentioned those first two examples of actual paramilitary activity the CIA was involved in Jamaica.
There was a fire, for example, that took place in Jamaica of an old people's home. I think 150 old and infirmed women, many of them blind, were living in this home. And as it turned out, the place burned down in the space of about 7 or 8 minutes. It was discovered that the phone wires had been cut and that their exits had all been blocked. Even those who could see their way out could not get out. And that the means by which the fire was set was the use of a petroleum jelly, which was unavailable in Jamaica. This was one indication, among others, that there was outside help. Why would the CIA, you might ask, why would the CIA want to murder 150 old women? It was because it was an effort, part of a very large-scale effort to discredit the government in Jamaica, which was at the time headed by Michael Manley, the Prime Minister. There were images produced of Michael Manley in the media, in the Daily Gleaner, which was the newspaper which the United States, through the CIA, helped to support. And there is a good deal of evidence of that. There were images of Michael Manley showing a death mask. I mean, it was his face which had been somehow made to look like a death mask, although it was pretending to be a photograph of him. And there were many ways to try and discredit him. This is very, very similar, in fact, to what the CIA did to try and discredit Salvador Allende in Chile. If you remember, Richard Nixon instructed the CIA in a meeting which was in 1970 in the White House, and there was a document in the Senate report which is reprinted, and he said, "Make the economy scream." Those were his words. And that's, of course, what the CIA proceeded to do in Chile, and that's what they also did in Jamaica.
They also furnished a lot of munitions and assistance to the terrorist squads that were going around killing people in the cities and also in the countryside in Jamaica as well.
That's correct.
Well, John, you had a trip down to Jamaica, and you saw a lot of these things about Jamaica with your own eyes, right?
Yes, indeed. A very moving, a very interesting trip to me to see a target country at a time in the height of a CIA operation when I was completely outside. So there's no way that I could see the problem that journalists have always had when the U.S. government was targeting on a country in a situation, trying to destabilize it, overthrow, or manipulate the elections or whatever, of trying to figure out what's going on when you don't have access to all of the flow of cables and the discussions in National Security Council meetings and whatnot for the planning. I observed that from published information, the CIA station there was quite large for that size of the country. It was huge, in fact. It was bigger than any station I knew of in Africa, although Jamaica was a fairly small island with 2 million people. That's typical of when the CIA has got a big operation going in a place. They beef up the station and beef up the offices back stateside. The tone and flow of articles in the Gleaner was, of course, as Lou says, definitely a chapter out of Chile or a chapter out of the Angolan operation. Every indication of a massive CIA operation going to destabilize the government, to make the economy scream. And in that case, I would say that probably someone got promoted for that one, probably several people.
Because Manley was run out of office
support
by a legitimate...
Yeah, without a scandal, without an assassination, without the things that have caused the CIA so much grief, Manley, a champion of social democracy, of giving the people a piece of the pie, was thrown out of office, and an arch-capitalist was put in office. And again, there was minimal adverse publicity. Lou Wolf and the others were studying the situation and did publish about what was going on, but it was not published in the New York Times and the Washington Post, and the big television networks didn't do studies on it, primarily because even if the journalists of the big organs knew what was happening and might have wanted to, they really just, because of the secrecy, couldn't get the truth about what the United States was doing. One interesting thing was that the effectiveness of the liars in our government, the duplicity. When we formed the CIA, we committed our leaders to having two policies, as Lou says, the rhetoric, the public statements, and the truth about what United States policy is. So an interesting measure of presidents is how effectively they lie. Interesting discussions that occur inside the CIA is about lying. Would you lie? You're the DDO and you're going to testify to the Senate. And serious discussions. Are you going to lie? Because if you do, it's perjury and there's a chance you could go to jail. And yet, the organization expects you to lie. President Carter was one of the most effective liars I have ever watched on television and through the media. As a poker player, man, I would never go up against that man. He could look at that camera and say things that obviously he knew were completely and totally false. And I would study his expression and I could detect nothing except occasionally a little wisp of a smile that wasn't consistent with what he was saying. Like he thought it was funny. But one of his more classic...
tick, actually.
Well, the smile that I was referring to wasn't that. It was just a kind of like he was repressing a grin, like he thought it was funny. How he rationalized these things, I don't know. But one of his most conspicuous lies was when he sat down with Manley just a few weeks before the elections in Washington and told him face to face that the CIA, don't have the CIA doing anything to destabilize you or your government. We have no such program going. And obviously he did. And he pulled it off to the point where even Manley was troubled. Very effective lie.
This is the Cutting Edge on IRFM where we're playing these clips because a lot of them have a course, a direction, and the one we just played a while ago is the destabilization of Jamaica in the 70s by the CIA. And it's very interesting, the man mentioned about Chile and how the same formula them use I was using in Chile, the same formula I'm using in Jamaica. Well, Venezuela is on the lips now, on the tip of everybody's tongue as it relates to how America is going to show them colors now as it relates to invasion, not invasion of planes and ships, but economical invasion. And this is all about the oil. This is not about, well, it's all about oil and the kind of government. And you know, America don't like no other government more than the government that tore the line of America. And that was why you hear the man talk about Michael Manley government a while ago. Michael Manley government was too near to Castro, who was the number one enemy of America in this region, yeah. And them couldn't get out Castro. And them couldn't them couldn't afford for our next country like Cuba rise up in the Caribbean, yeah, so like Jamaica especially. So they had to destabilize the country. A lot of people don't want to accept it. That Jamaica was destabilized by the CIA, and that is proof there where we just write of people who actually was involved in the destabilization. So when we come to Venezuela now, we see Venezuela is on the tip now, and a lot of things going to happen in Venezuela. People going to die in Venezuela. You're going to hear about dictatorship in Venezuela. You're going to hear about no democracy in Venezuela. And then you're going to hear about who have the oil, who are the owner for the oil, according to my brethren. Who are the owner for the oil, because that is really what them is all about now. It's not just not being a democratic country. It's about who are the owner for the oil. That is really what it's about. Those of you who have WhatsApp and them things, they know a lot of these clips is genuine clips, but you're not going to want to miss the next one.
We economic hitmen really have been the ones responsible for creating this first truly global empire. And we work many different ways. But perhaps the most common is that we will identify a country that has resources our corporations covet, like oil, and then arrange a huge loan to that country from the World Bank or one of its sister organizations. But the money never actually goes to the country. Instead, it goes to our big corporations to build infrastructure projects in that country, power plants, industrial parks, ports, things that benefit a few rich people in that country, in addition to our corporations, but really don't help the majority of the people at all. However, those people, the whole country is left holding a huge debt. It's such a big debt they can't repay it, and that's part of the plan, that they can't repay it. And so at some point, we economic hitmen go back to them and say, listen, you owe us a lot of money, can't pay your debt, so sell your oil real cheap to our oil companies. Allow us to build a military base in your country, or send troops in support of ours to someplace in the world like Iraq, or vote with us on the next UN vote to have their electric utility company privatized and their water and sewage system privatized and sold to U.S. corporations or other multinational corporations. So there's that whole mushrooming thing, and it's so typical of the way the IMF and the World Bank work. They put a country in debt. It's such a big debt it can't pay it, and then you offer to refinance that debt and pay even more interest. And you demand this quid pro quo, which you call a conditionality or good governance, which means basically that they've got to sell off their resources, including many of their social services, their utility companies, their school systems sometimes, their penal systems, their insurance systems to foreign corporations. So it's a double, triple, quadruple whammy. The precedent for economic hitmen really began back in the early 50s when democratically elected Mossadegh, who was elected in Iran, he was considered to be the hope for democracy in the Middle East and around the world. He was Time Magazine's Man of the Year. But one of the things that he'd run on and began to implement was the idea that foreign oil companies needed to pay the Iranian people a lot more for the oil that they were taking out of Iran. The Iranian people should benefit from their own oil. Strange policy. We didn't like that, of course. But we were afraid to do what we normally were doing, which was to send in the military. Instead, we sent in one CIA agent, Kermit Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt's relative. And Kermit went in with a few $1 million and was very, very effective and efficient. And in a short amount of time, he managed to get Mossadegh overthrown. and brought in the Shah of Iran to replace him, who always was favorable to oil. And it was extremely effective.
Bombs overflow Tehran. Army officers shout that Mossadegh has surrendered and his regime as virtual dictator of Iran is ended. Pictures of the Shah are paraded through the streets as sentiment reverses. The Shah is welcomed home.
So back here in the United States, in Washington, people looked around and said, wow, that was easy and cheap. So this established a whole new way of manipulating countries, of creating empire. The only problem with Roosevelt was that he was a card-carrying CIA agent, and had he been caught, the ramifications could have been pretty serious. So very quickly at that point, the decision was made to use private consultants to channel the money through the World Bank or the IMF or one of the other such agencies, to bring in people like me who worked for private companies, so that if we got caught, there would be no governmental ramifications. When Arbenz became president of Guatemala, the country was very much under the thumbs of United Fruit Company, the big international corporations. And Arbenz ran on this ticket that says, we want to get the land back to the people. And once he took power, he was implementing policies that would do exactly that, give the land rights back to the people. United Fruit didn't like that very much. And so they hired a public relations firm, launched a huge campaign in the United States to convince the United States people, the citizens of the United States, and the press of the United States, and the Congress of the United States, that Arbenz was a Soviet puppet, and that if we allowed him to stay in power, the Soviets would have a foothold in this hemisphere. And that at that point in time was a huge fear on everybody's mind, the Red Terror, the Communist terror. And so, to make a long story short, out of this public relations campaign came a commitment on the part of the CIA and the military to take this man out. And in fact, we did. We sent in planes, we sent in soldiers, we sent in jackals, we sent everything in to take him out, and did take him out. And as soon as he was removed from office, the new guy that took over after him basically reinstated everything to the big international corporations, including United Fruit. Ecuador for many, many years had been ruled by pro-U.S. dictators, often relatively brutal. Then it was decided that they were going to have a truly democratic election. Jaime Roldos ran for office. And his main goal, he said, as president would be to make sure that Ecuador's resources were used to help the people. And he won, overwhelming, by more votes than anybody had ever won anything in Ecuador. And he began to implement these policies to make sure that the profits from oil went to help the people. Well, we didn't like that in the United States. I was sent down as one of several economic hitmen to change Roldos, to corrupt him, to bring him around, to let him know, okay, you can get very rich, you and your family, if you play our game, but if you continue to try to keep these policies you've promised, you're going to go. He wouldn't listen. He was assassinated. As soon as the plane crashed, the whole area was cordoned off. The only people that allowed in were U.S. military from a nearby base and some of the Ecuadorian military. When an investigation was launched, two of the key witnesses died in car accidents before they had a chance to testify. A lot of very, very strange things that went on around the assassination of Jaime Roldos. I, like most people who've really looked at this case, have absolutely no doubt that it was an assassination. And of course, in my position as an economic hitman, I was always expecting something to happen to Jaime, whether it be a coup or assassination, I wasn't sure, but that he would be taken down because he was not being corrupted. He would not allow himself to be corrupted the way we wanted to corrupt him. Omar Torrijos, president of Panama, was, one of my favorite people. I really, really liked him. He was very charismatic. He was a guy who really wanted to help his country. And when I tried to bribe him or corrupt him, he said, look, John, he called me Juanito. He said, look, Juanito, I don't need the money. What I really need is for my country to be treated fairly. I need for the United States to repay the debts that you owe my people for all the destruction you've done here. I need to be in a position where I can help other Latin American countries win their independence and be free of this terrible presence from the north that you people are exploiting us so badly. I need to have the Panama Canal back in the hands of the Panamanian people. That's what I want. And so, leave me alone. Don't try to bribe me. It was 1981, and in May, Jaime Roldos was assassinated. And Omar was very aware of this. Torrijos got his family together and he said, I'm probably next, but it's okay, because I've done what I came here to do. I've renegotiated the canal. The canal will now be in our hands. He just finished negotiating the treaty with Jimmy Carter. In June of that same year, just a couple of months later, he also went down in an airplane crash, which there's no question was executed by CIA-sponsored jackals. Tremendous amount of evidence that one of Torrijos' security guards handed him at the last moment as he was getting on the plane a tape recorder, a small tape recorder that contained a bomb. It is interesting to me how this system has continued pretty much the same way for years and years and years, except the economic hitmen have got better and better and better. Then we come up with, very recently, what happened in Venezuela. In 1998, Hugo Chavez gets elected president, following a long line of presidents who had been very corrupt and basically destroyed the economy of the country. And Chavez was elected amidst all that. Chavez stood up to the United States, and he's done it primarily demanding that Venezuelan oil be used to help the Venezuelan people. Well, we didn't like that in the United States. So in 2002, a coup was staged, which there's no question in my mind, and most other people's minds, that the CIA was behind that coup. The way that coup was fomented was very reflective of what Kermit Roosevelt had done in Iran, of paying people to go out into the streets, to riot, to protest, to say this Chavez is very unpopular. If you can get a few thousand people to do that, you can get television and can make it look like it's the whole country, and things start to mushroom. Except in the case of Chavez, he was smart enough, and the people were so strongly behind him that they overcame it, which was a phenomenal moment in the history of Latin America. Iraq actually is a perfect example of the way the whole system works. So we economic hitmen are the first line of defense. We go in, we try to corrupt governments and get them to accept these huge loans, which we then use as leverage to basically own them. If we fail, as I failed in Panama with Omar Torrijos and in Ecuador with Jaime Roldos, men who refused to be corrupted, then the second line of defense is we send in the jackals. And the jackals either overthrow governments or they assassinate. And once that happens, when a new government comes in, boy, it's going to toe the line, because the new president knows what will happen if he doesn't. In the case of Iraq, both of those things failed. Economic hitmen were not able to get through to Saddam Hussein. We tried very hard. We tried to get him to accept a deal very similar to what the House of Saud had accepted in Saudi Arabia, but he wouldn't accept it. And so the jackals went in to take him out. They couldn't do it. His security was very good. After all, he had one time worked for the CIA. He'd been hired to assassinate a former president of Iraq and failed, but he knew the system. So in 91, we send in the troops, and we take out the Iraqi military. So we assume at that point that Saddam Hussein is going to come around. We could have taken him out, of course, at that time, but we didn't want him. He's the kind of strong man we like. He controls his people. We thought he could control the Kurds and keep the Iranians in their border and keep pumping oil for us. And that once we took out his military, now he's going to come around. So the economic hitmen go back in the 90s without success. If they'd had success, he'd still be running the country. We'd be selling him all the fighter jets he wants and everything else he wants. But they couldn't. They didn't have success. The jackals couldn't take him out again. So we sent the military in once again, and this time we did the complete job and took him out, and in the process created for ourselves some very, very lucrative construction deals. Had to reconstruct a country that we essentially destroyed, which is a pretty good deal if you own construction companies, big ones. So, Iraq shows the three stages. The economic hitmen failed there, the jackals failed there, and as a final measure, the military goes in. And in that way, we've really created an empire, but we've done it very, very subtly. It's clandestine. All the empires of the past were built on the military, and everybody knew they were building them. So that the British knew they were building them, the French, the Germans, the Romans, the Greeks, and they were proud of it. And they always had some excuse, like spreading civilization, spreading some religion, something like that. But they knew they were doing it. We don't. The majority of the people in the United States have no idea that we're living off the benefits of a clandestine empire, that today there's more slavery in the world than ever before. And then you have to ask yourself, well, if it's an empire, then who's the emperor? Obviously, our presidents of the United States are not emperors. An emperor is someone who's not elected, doesn't serve a limited term, and doesn't report to anyone, essentially. So you can't classify our presidents that way. But we do have what I consider to be the equivalent of the emperor, and it's what I call the corporatocracy. The corporatocracy is this group of individuals who run our biggest corporations, and they really act as the emperor of this empire. They control our media, either through direct ownership or advertising. They control most of our politicians because they finance their campaigns, either through their corporations or through personal contributions that come out of the corporations. They're not elected, and they don't serve a limited term, they don't report to anybody. And at the very top of the corporatocracy, you really can't tell whether a person's working for a private corporation or the government because they're always moving back and forth. So, you've got a guy who one moment is the president of a big construction company like Halliburton, and the next moment he's vice president of the United States, or the president who is in the oil business. And this is true whether you've got Democrats or Republicans in the office. You have to moving back and forth through the revolving door. And in a way, our government is invisible a lot of the time, and its policies are carried out by our corporations on one level or another. And then again, the policies of the government are basically forged by the corporatocracy and then presented to the government, and they become government policy. So it's an incredibly cozy relationship. This isn't a conspiracy theory type of thing. These people don't have to get together and plot to do things. They all basically work under one primary assumption, and that is that they must maximize profits regardless of the social and environmental costs.
This process of manipulation by the corporatocracy through the use of debt, bribery, and political overthrow is called globalization. Just as the Federal Reserve keeps the American public in a position of indentured servitude through perpetual debt, inflation, and interest, the World Bank and IMF serve this role on a global scale. The basic scam is simple. Put a country in debt either by its own indiscretion or through corrupting the leader of that country, then impose conditionalities or structural adjustment policies, often consisting of the following. Currency devaluation. When the value of a currency drops, so does everything valued in it. This makes indigenous resources available to predator countries at a fraction of their worth. Large funding cuts for social programs. These usually include education and healthcare, compromising the well-being and integrity of the society, leaving the public vulnerable to exploitation. Privatization of state-owned enterprises. This means that socially important systems can be purchased and regulated by foreign corporations for profit. For example, in 1999, the World Bank insisted that the Bolivian government sell the public water system of its third largest city to a subsidy of the U.S. corporation Bechtel. As soon as this occurred, water bills for the already impoverished local residents skyrocketed. It wasn't until after a full-blown revolt by the people that the Bechtel contract was nullified. Then there's trade liberalization, or the opening up of the economy through removing any restrictions on foreign trade. This allows for a number of abusive economic manifestations, such as transnational corporations bringing in their own mass-produced products, undercutting the indigenous production and ruining local economies. An example is Jamaica, which, after accepting loans and conditionalities from the World Bank, lost its largest cash crop markets due to competition with Western imports. Today, countless farmers are out of work, for they are unable to compete with the large corporations. Another variation is the creation of numerous, seemingly unnoticed, unregulated, inhumane sweatshop factories, which take advantage of the imposed economic hardship. Additionally, due to production deregulation, environmental destruction is perpetual, as a country's resources are often exploited by the indifferent corporations while outputting large amounts of deliberate pollution.
The largest environmental lawsuit in the history of the world today is being brought on behalf of 30,000 Ecuadorian Amazonian people against Texaco, which is now owned by Chevron. So today it's against Chevron, but for activities conducted by Texaco. Estimated to be more than 18 times what the Exxon Valdez dumped into the coast of Alaska. In the case of Ecuador, it wasn't an accident. The oil companies did it intentionally. They knew they were doing it to save money out there rather than arranging for proper disposal.
Furthermore, a cursory glance at the performance record of the World Bank reveals that the institution, which publicly claims to help poor countries develop and alleviate poverty, has done nothing but increase poverty and the wealth gap, while corporate profits soar. In 1960, the income gap between the fifth of the world's people in the richest countries versus the fifth in the poorest countries was 30 to 1. By 1998, it was 74 to 1. While global GNP rose 40% between 1970 and 1985, those in poverty actually increased by 17%. While from 1985 to 2000, those living on less than $1 a day increased by 18%. Even the Joint Economic Committee of the U.S. Congress admitted that there is a mere 40% success rate of all World Bank projects. In the late 1960s, the World Bank intervened in Ecuador with large loans. During the next 30 years, poverty grew from 50% to 70%. Under or unemployment grew from 15 to 70%. Public debt increased from 240 million to 16 billion, while the share of resources allocated to the poor went from 20% to 6%. In fact, by the year 2000, 50% of Ecuador's national budget had to be allocated for paying its debts. It is important to understand the World Bank is, in fact, a U.S. bank supporting U.S. interests. For the United States holds veto power over decisions, as it is the largest provider of capital. And where did it get this money? You guessed it. It made it out of thin air through the fractional reserve banking system. Of the world's top 100 economies, as based on annual GDP, 51 are corporations, and 47 of that 51 are U.S.-based. Walmart, General Motors, and Exxon are more economically powerful than Saudi Arabia, Poland, Norway, South Africa, Finland, Indonesia, and many others. And as protective trade barriers are broken down, currencies tossed together and manipulated in floating markets, and state economies overturned in favor of open competition and global capitalism, the empire expands.
You get up on your little 21-inch screen and howl about America and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. There is only IBM and ITT and AT&T and DuPont, Dow, Union Carbide, and Exxon. Those are the nations of the world today. What do you think the Russians talk about in their councils of state? Karl Marx? They get out their linear programming charts, statistical decision theories, Minimax solutions, and compute the price-cost probabilities of their transactions and investments, just like we do. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies, Mr. Beale. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business, Mr. Beale.
Yeah, the world is a business. I tell you. You didn't talk about Exxon a while ago. You can bet your bottom dollar that Venezuela situation there will involve Exxon. They are going to come through big time. They is part of the control and manipulation of the earth, resources, finances, and all these things. So, Guyana, very close to Venezuela. Exxon is a big oil company. Yes, man. I tell you, we're on the cutting edge. We never go no big university, but we can discern what is happening. This is not no conspiracy theory. We're seeing it manifesting, opening up in front of our eyes. Yes, it's opening right in front of our eyes. Let who have eyes to see. Let who have ears to hear. This is the Cutting Edge on RFM. Yeah, we're there with you. Cutting Edge. You know, we have got through our brains a while ago. I listened to this tape a while ago, and it's just amazing that the IMF is there at Jamaica right now, and the borrowing of money is supposed to get you out a certain rut. Are we getting out of the rut? I mean, we see the dollar fluctuates so much times in and out. Right now, they are about $130 to $1. We see the educational system still need movement, and the health part. Now everybody talk about the healthcare system, but you hear the man talk about what is required of these multinational. What is required for you to get loans and acquire certain status in their eyes. And we say most of the government because the country in a certain financial strain, them want it's not that them wicked. It's not that some of them governments are wicked, you know. It's just that they are so blinded to what is up the sleeve of these countries, these were so-called big countries. They are so blinded by it. They never go to university to go study of his bob and weave and scheme like them. That anything where these Americans come with, Chinese come with, because them want to look good, make the people them feel say them will do good things and create this and create that. Them will just go with it, knowing that the consequences that is supposed to be paid because of these mistakes will not be paid by them, but will be paid by children after children after children that will be going to school, trying to learn certain things, claim to them want to come out of school and get better jobs when there will be no jobs there for them. And we still are grappling with entrepreneurship where they never teach you how to own things, them teach you how to manage things. We have to develop this ownership skill. So these politicians who run the country, it's not that them would have like a magic wand just come and just make everything go right, you know, that them can stay in a power forever ever. But it don't work that way. It don't work that way because you have the unseen hand hovering over them. Because that unseen hand is working not in the interest of the people them who these politicians is governing, but is working for the multinational. And the multinationals is there, as you hear the man say, to make money. They have nothing to do with nothing else. By any means necessary, they want to make money. They want to be wealthy by any means necessary. So when you look at what is going on now with the evil, our people, them, our government, as you know, and we can be blinded by what is taking place and say, yes, things progress. But when you look at the situation of the people, when you look at the people, and where the people them there, we're not talking about statistics. We're not talking about data. We're talking about just everyday look on the people. You realize something's still wrong. Because the people them who did a rule, we're talking about money people. The people them who did a rule with 20 years ago still a rule with now. Because them just passed down the whole money to some children. And you will never see them walk on the street. You will never see them walking on the street. These children of the owners of industries and commerce will give a little so-called PhD, doctorate, masters, some position for all, that when the aggression and the aggressiveness start, the workers will see somebody will look like them because and go and bad and eventually are killed too. But the real and true owners will never be seen. Never be seen. You won't see them working at the factory. Not about the big one, they may not talk about the one who own that store along there, so I own that store along there. So we are talking about the true owners who decide if the money going to be $130 or going to be $100. Who going to decide that the gas is $50 a barrel or $100 a barrel? And now we can even add it, who decide that the place is going to be very cold or very hot? Who decide what you eat, what you wear, and on another level, how you think? Because that is really where the action is. The action is who can decide. Not your everyday thing now. We're not talking about the people them who decide your everyday thing. Because your everyday thing can fluctuate. We are talking about who decide what you wear. Who decide what you eat? Who decide? Who decide? And when you get right down to it, who decide that you will never see them? But they are there. They are the unseen hands. They are there in some tall skyscraper building sitting down, or on a yacht somewhere way out in the seas. They are there, manipulating, scheming and conniving. It's a serious thing. Very, very serious thing. And when you listen to them people that talk on a tape a while ago, you realize how serious it is. Very, very serious. It's not about conspiracy. It's a reality. How long? Sweet honey in the rock. I will keep asking that question because the Virgin Damien said the slave mill a grind, but it's a grind slow still. Can you believe that? The slave mill a grind, but it's a grind slow still. The greatest weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. And it's all about who have the most power. Power. Sometimes people believe there's money, but it's power. Money help you along the way, but power is what it is all about, man. When you can decide that a whole nation go and get up to reach at a specific place, at a specific hour, every day. Every day. When you can decide that a group of people and a whole nation going to go home at a specific time and a specific hour every day, that is power. That is power. You decide that, then you know so you have power. We're not talking about decide that your child or your husband or your wife. We're talking about a whole nation. A whole nation. Life and livelihood depend on getting up and reaching at a specific place, at a specific time, every day. And if you don't reach there every day, your equilibrium going to just unbalance. Just unbalance. And most of us got to this place and don't feel fulfilled. We don't feel fulfilled. But we do it because we are zombies, machines that is manipulated by the unseen hands of those who don't even have to leave them place of abode. But them control us, them control. When them decide, you move. And when them decide, you don't move. But no matter what, it's them decided. And who is them, we might ask. Well, we know them is there, but the identification of them is sometimes limited to our thinking and how we use our consciousness and our mind and our spirit to discern what is happening to us and around us. That a group of people can decide that millions of people, millions, not just thousands. And when I talk about, when I say group of people, when I talk about 1,000 people neither, we are talking about in the hundreds. A group of people can decide that millions of people going to get up every morning and reach at a certain place, the specific time, the same time, and leave that place the same time every day. Think about it. Who is doing that and who is deciding that? You will never know. But guess what? It's not you. Because if it was you, you would have don't do it and then don't feel no way. But you see, if you don't do it, you're going to feel a way. You're going to feel say you have missed something. You're going to feel say you might not be able to go back there. You might feel say your whole life structure is defaulted because you didn't have light bill for pay, you didn't have rent for pay, you didn't have baby feeding for go buy, you didn't have school for go deal with. All of these things you have to do between that hour and that hour, that they decide when you do it and when you don't do it. That's a serious thing to think about. How did they get us to move in one accord? In one accord. But when it comes to our survival as a race, we can't move in one accord. Our survival as a race is limited to our survival on an everyday basis that is clocked, C-L-O-C-K-E-D, clocked between, let us say, 8 o'clock and 5 o'clock. Between 8 o'clock and 5 o'clock, our life is regulated, designed, fashioned into a zombie perspective. We are zombies moving here and there and not going nowhere but here and there. Think about it. This is the cutting edge on RFM. And bring a different vibes to radio. We want to play this song here, you know. Why listen to this song here? Why you let my brethren down a rum lane, you know. Why rum lane, trust me, I think my every day, say, oh, I'm not coming down a yard yet, but trust me, I'm going to come. I have to. Yeah, man, I have to. So here we know, we're going to play this tune here. Listen to this tune here, everyone. Listen to this. I know it's only for one might not hear it before, because you listen to reggae radio. But the message we are working with right now, the message. Yeah, this is the cutting edge. I hope you're still there with me, you know, because we're not done yet, you know. I hope you're still there with me. Okay. In the world of confusion, yeah, may I tell you, and misinformation and all the things them that them do, forget you in line. Them do the things them forget you in line. But we know different here right now. We know different. We want to play this song here. It's an old song, but it's a new song. We play it. We don't play oldies. We play a song where, especially upon this program, we feel can send a message to the listener. So whether it's a long time or a now, from it I send a message to the listener, we play it positively. The J-Boys, man, from them time there, yeah, man, the music they make long time. For most of you who are listening to it, band, man. Very relevant at this time, yeah. We're going to take some phone call, you know. We're going to take some phone call. Believe you me, I'm afraid to open the phone call, but I'm going to take it still. I'm afraid to open the phone, but I'm going to open it still. Why you love Duke bass, you know? Yeah, why you love Duke? For a different reason from YouTube, but just why you love him up. You understand? I say, Cutting Edge has influenced Duke a lot. Till Duke, you know, the cold, they are plant food. Duke have plant tomato and carrot and all the things they be like, yeah, I don't know what to come here now with the coal. Because, me I tell you, I used to up the coal like coal, man. Yes, and America, man, finger drop off. Trust me. We say a thing where them say how much people the road for the people. Oh, all them people there. We don't have no yard for go on a house for go now. I mean, in a New York, let them go down to the subway there. You know, there's a city under the city. I will don't know that, you know. There's a city under the city, you know. We go down there already. May I tell you, when you go down to the subway about 3-story down, people down there like worries. When a down there them live, you know, amongst the rat, them and some big rat there, they look like, may I tell you, when you go down there, you can't believe it's a first world country, and I said, that exists. We talk about New York City, right in a Manhattan there. When you go down and I need the subway there, And I go down, and you look underneath them and you see the people them down there. I mean, I wonder how, at one time, them say 20 million homeless people in America. 20 million. I tell you that. I tell you. 3 people pay for 1 year can stop hunger in the earth. 3 people. 3 people in the earth right now. We have where's billionaires. The money with them earn in a 1 year, the 3 of them combined together can stop hunger on earth. Yet still they are talk about some people will live under the ground. Under the ground, man. And especially now with the school, all them people that were in England, London, and up at the top, way up at Scotland, so. I mean, why? Wow. Anyway. Yes, here.
Muta.
What is it?
Yes, man.
Wait. Wait.
Yes, Papa.
The cold run you.
Long time I can't get you out.
You think of the cold run you now, make you come back.
No, Sam, I'm glad you're both up there.
Well, I tell you, some serious thing are going on, man.
Rough, man. But me hear them, they talk on the radio, so they want to open up, they have some eating shelter, like some places where you can go.
Yeah, me hear about that. But people are dead already. And them say the worst part, it's going to be Friday.
Mm-hmm. Well, when I will feel the effects, man, I
tell you, hey, watch your man, watch ya. After the year start, I feel the effects, you know. The place cold, you know, Rasta. Which way you live? You don't feel the cold?
Sent me here, but some breeze when we get out today.
Yeah, the breeze, me get the breeze. But send me there right near, by the border there almost.
Yeah, man, just up the road from here.
No, me I tell you, Rasta, it's cold at night time, yeah. Me I tell you, but now it's cold now. Because in time them up there, so...
I'm going to comfort every drive.
Yeah. So a long time I know you, man.
But, hey, you know, you talk about the America and the great bastion of democracy and all that. Then now talk about the rule of law. They do everything by the rule of law and that. But the thing that frightens me is, so the government don't have to start pick up to them phrase them, you know, about the rule of law and them threat to national security.
National security.
You know, when you talk about them threat, which national security they got to threat, you know?
I tell you.
And time they want to do foolishness.
Don't let them start use the word terrorist now, too.
I think he does, correct.
You never use the word terrorist.
Me and up a ball of error there now. It's so deep in me, you know,
these criminals are terrorists. At the minister, me here, I say it.
Rule of law. What is the rule of law? No one rule of law than that.
Yeah.
He who rules make the laws.
Yeah.
And that I rule of law, you know.
Yeah.
When you rule, you make the law. You know, see how them change the goalposts every time. You know? Look what they do in Sudan. You know, then one time them tell Sudan, I remember what I do. I said them have to stop do that. They never release them some money and take off sanctions. The man them do it, them give them sickness and say, well, all right, no. You have to free up South Sudan, make them be a separate place. The man them do that, they still say, all right, no, you have to do this. They just keep changing goalposts.
Yeah, man, all right, man. I know them are doing it in Venezuela now.
The people elect them president. Whether or not in teeth, make them see how you out.
Yeah.
Oh, you got to say this man.
Are you a company now, Russia going at your business?
But them about who interfere in the people in election and politics more than them.
You can't name the whole of the country. You can't name Chile, Guatemala, you can't name El Salvador, you can't name Libya.
As far as me concerned, I them mash up Jamaica, you know. When time I try to get with a man. But
remember, you heard the thing I just play a while ago?
Which one?
The one who about him actions in Jamaica in the 70s. You never hear or you never listen?
I must do it. I
a clip a while ago, a longer clip about America in the whole of the country them where them use hitman them. But me play the next one where I want to talk about specifically where the CIA do in Jamaica in the 70s.
Yeah, but when Aggie did come down and tell them everybody that the matter about line not go so till they release when the
papers them.
When Farah can get the papers them.
Yeah, America release the paper them. Yeah.
But a long time we know about them. Well, we then do I and them down in South America, down
Chile.
Oh, Chile.
Yeah.
You know, down there, so the first 9/11 when there.
Yeah.
Where them mess up down there, so then we will show you word them. Panama them mess with
Panama.
Nari them set up people. You see. Every country then going like you say. Never turn on.
Devastation.
Foolishness.
The Isle, man. No, it's the Isle now. The Isle and the democracy them out talk about, you know. If you're not democratic, you can't work with them. But now them have something else to go for his Isle. So them can wipe out the so-called dictator in the country and take away the Isle. Under the name of democracy. Yeah. And that is why it's Venezuela. So now we in Jamaica here talk about compulsory acquisition and a vote like so we don't understand where we're going. We don't vote against Israel. We vote against Venezuela.
That me I say.
You know what I mean?
Really? More atrocities than Israel.
Yeah.
Thank you, 16-year-old girl and also that she 16-year-old school girl over there. Same that try to stab the soldier.
Yeah.
And something like when they talk about Venezuela, I will mash up. I them put in sanction on when they like Chavez.
Chavez, they never like Chavez.
And then put sanction down there and mash up.
And him never care he just decides to go on the
remember when he said Vincent the Fox, bush lapdog.
Yeah.
That's something there. You know what I do? For a long time, me want to get in touch with you and Kabu Fed. You see that the injection them with the one the girl them
for the cervical cancer.
HPV.
Cervical cancer.
Me want to say one brother named Dr. Gardner, Neil Gardner. If you get in touch with that you have some whole information when you read off there. For sure, you know, some whole heap of data, whole heap of everything, when I show that the government not put out the full story and the all kind of things.
You mean this government,
Yes. Me frighten me doing Kabu, I call them the advertisement for the government, I make somebody I give about if she used to this and that, and I know what happened to that. All kind of something. Them never do an injection something that we know with our one. The amount of information we hear.
Yeah. But they want to say a conspiracy because, you know, it's conspiracy theory. That them really want to make you feel like.
If you don't get to that youth there, because he's a chiropractor, really, doctor, and thing. But the youth have some information when you go at night time. But next one, the Chinese. Tell me something.
No, where the youth name? Where the doctor name?
Neil Gardner.
Oh, Neil Gardner, okay.
Yeah. The Vernon Field, how far it is from like Tiaman Estate?
Vernon Field? It's all fire, man.
Because, alright. The Chinese, when I say Chinese, I go be one city.
Tiaman Estate, yeah.
Around Vernon Field, you know, they're supposed to be like, what they call it, Euro Palace.
Eurodrome, like,
Euro Palace, no, Eurodrome. Euro Palace, because they won't build, they call it, when they build a city around an airport.
Oh, yeah?
That means, you know, yeah, it's a city around an airport.
You mean a kind of Vernon Field?
Just like how you have Metropolis. Yes. The whole, we call it, I think, which eardrum went down there? One earfield went down and now fix up.
No, what may I say? Them are build a city in a Vernon Field, round Vernon Field.
Them are build an airport with a city with every infrastructure.
Yeah, me hear about the airport, but me never know that city.
Then call it Aeropolis, or some year, the Prime Minister said. Then call it Aeropolis, like we have Metropolis.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, Aeropolis, when you build the city around the airport.
Around the airport.
Like that's it. Miami Airport built up and the whole heap of everything built up around it. So it's free to everything and all kind of concession. Some I wonder how far them behind everything.
I don't know how far they reach. I know them slowly but surely I do them thing and I go on like they not do nothing. And the government go on like them not do nothing either, but other than road. That's all we see in front of his road. And them make up to believe say it's a good thing, but then the price that we have to pay for those roads.
And the secret deal them want to know about.
Yeah.
You understand? Then they build one city in Ethiopia, you know.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, but me say it empty like me don't know.
Them always build things and then nobody not live there.
Because me I want the toll road where them a collect. And me know say if me myself and then say the people say price too high, then I buy. Me I go drop down the price, if me get them to buy, then I go put up the price. And then bring up toll, then put up the toll when nobody knows the toll.
I think it's going to raise this week at the going back to town. I think that side they're going to have a adjust. Them call it adjusting the price.
Adjusting, yes. Come here, I said that means they don't want the loan to have, they don't want the money make to have the loan. They want with default. And that may I see, just
and
like
there are examples of what happened when you default and Jamaica no want to look upon it. They make it sound like when we talk, we are create mischief and we are showing them about what your president will set with these not paying off loans in the world, in Africa, in Far East.
We soon get a police station. We soon get a China police station, I guess.
May I tell you?
Because me I say, you go send police station, build police station in a country, put in fear police and say you protect your interest. Police not protect interest around well, anything a soldier you use.
Soldier, yeah.
But I can bet to them the police are them special forces.
You so see the soldier them too, and you so see Chinese baby I call your daddy.
Me afraid about that go Thailand, then me I wonder if that's a part of a secret deal.
You mean the army?
Me I say wonder if part of a secret deal for default man and then go Thailand.
Oh, for build up the thing where them like originally build the hub. Hello?
I don't know where I go.
You cut out and look like your phone a battery business I go on.
No, I want to start right around time breeze go sometimes I guess they move on and the network no pick up too good.
Okay.
And next thing I want to talk about in Ethiopia, we hear them talk about what they like they might bring back the monarchy. You hear about that?
No.
Might the grandson. That's the grandson.
Oh, yeah.
That's the grandson.
You mean Zara Jacob?
One of them. I don't remember. I think I am.
Oh, yeah.
The government who in now. You see, them make peace with Eritrea.
Eritrea, yeah.
And them do everything and let out prisoners, political prisoners, do everything. They might bring back a constitutional monarchy like with England.
Oh, yeah, like a figurehead.
Yeah, me heard from BBC about three weeks ago.
Oh, yeah? They'll try to love
the rest of them.
They'll try to love hear that, man.
Yeah, about 3 weeks ago, me heard from BBC.
Because them for them Trinity now is included Zara Jacob in it.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, like Bobo Trinity and Marcus, Haile Selassie and Emmanuel. But for them Trinity are Gad, Zara Jacob and Haile Selassie. More Zara Jacob than Haile Selassie too.
Them gone at the sun.
Because we know say China in other place enough.
Enough.
Yeah, man, the place they will build up now. Addis Ababa don't look like, the pictures of Addis Ababa what me see now. The last time I go there is like, I don't know, it's like township to city now. Because the Arab them they gone in there massively are creating, I know the Chinese them in there. You have more Islamic influence now than Christian influence in Ethiopia.
Wow.
Yeah, man.
Gone back to when time the Moors
yeah. And then you have the Chinese them come in and out even make it more stringent. Certain ways, but
and I just said that too. Yeah, you know, and the Chinese they not treat the Moors them over China they not treat them nice, you know, man. They can prison them to them in a well, then I'll call the prison and say, I'll the school for them to re-educate them.
Yeah.
School, all kind of some hundreds of thousands of them, but I prison them when they look on it.
Anyway, I have to move, Regine.
All right, then. Yeah, live up.
Yeah, this is the coaching age, you know, this is the advertisement a while ago. After 40 years, him dead 40 years ago. And him is still the number one reggae artist in the world. Bob Marley. Yeah, man. When him tune them play, they will sound like old. You know, people say old hits are vintage or retro music. Bob Marley music I play not sound like no vintage old hits or retro music. It sound now like it's now. I tell you, man, it's amazing. Yes, cutting edge.
Yeah, morning, Mr. Buta.
Morning, sir.
Yeah, man, I'm a tour driver, and somebody even said we really want to talk to you about the North Coast Highway. I know it's the right time now, but I apply the airport to Ocho on a daily basis, early morning, late night.
Yeah.
And the road is not from Greenwood to Saltmarsh. At night, I cannot see them road when you're traveling.
You know, I show you a talk.
I tell them, man,
I don't tell you something. Me I drive from Greenwood there one night, you know. I know Greenwood I come from, but as you pass Greenwood there.
I will soldiers are, yeah.
You know, me never realize I'm on the wrong side of the road.
You say I can't see the road.
You know, I'm supposed to mention it, I never mention it. You know?
And when you left from up when you catch up at Egg again.
Yes.
You go up to the Royalton Hotel, where them building new hotel. You can't see the road at night time.
I chew your talk, brethren. I chew your talk.
When you left, when you climb Royalton Hill and go on the flat, you go up Spring Hill left, you can't see that piece of road at night time.
They won't even put some cat in the middle of the road.
When you go from Spring Hill top, going down into Kerry Park, you can't see the road.
Yeah.
That's why you have so much accident on the road at night time.
Yeah.
When you take the Duncan's bypass, you can't see the swat tall going up the hill.
Them do have some cat in the road. You know, them should have some.
Them not no use. Even the Queen's Highway, terrible condition, and even the minister, I thought the Minister of Tourism would have talked about all them things, Mr. Head Bartlett, because him talk about him tourists every day, and he want to get on the best, and he not see the road no one mark, and then play a blind eye to it.
Yeah, I forgot remember to mention it tomorrow, you know, believe.
Yeah, I'll call it tomorrow, man, and even when they have accidents and Mr. Allen calling the police when they come down, they not talk about them things on the radio either.
Yeah.
And Mr. Kenneth White, they not talk about them something there. And the road need marking, definitely need marking.
Definitely. Me understand where you're talking about, it reached me already.
You will the rate me go out to since night and we can't see the road and the rain fall.
Yeah, man, it reached me already, man. Trust
me. And Mr. Head Bartlett, look at the amount of things they do and you know, see the road was marked. To tell the Minister of Transport to look about it.
Yeah. All right, give thanks to bring it up, Regine.
We can call it tomorrow. What number we can call upon? The same number?
Yeah, man. Same number.
All right, no problem. I leave it in your hands. I'll call back tomorrow, you know?
Yeah, all right, sir. Blessed.
Yeah, man. Thanks again. Cool.
Yeah. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You there, man?
Muta.
Yeah, man, I hear you.
Alice got play, man.
Eh?
Yes, I'm saying an happy birthday to hell government.
Yeah, well, I'm scratch.
Yeah, and happy birthday to hell government.
Scratch, how you do?
Me do all right, doing all right. Me glad to take the job where I do.
Me not see you, man.
Well, now that you start to deal with it, you want to see more asking, because now I see judgment, I see the declaration of Armageddon war, and now I see you on the track. I did the right thing.
The ice run you from Switzerland, man. The ice run you.
Well, Switzerland not so corrupt. That's why God sent me to hide in Switzerland to help him put the 144,000 saints together in the Valley of Decision. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
So I run away from the ice for a while and come down here to conquer the serpent and the serpent and his pent, and to teach the evil lesson for the people that we brought here with no food and no mood or anything. Now that I'm here you on the birthday time, I will say an happy birthday to all hell government, and bad luck to all hell government, and bad luck to all demons, and bad luck to all evil spirit, in the name of one God. Who's the God?
You tell me, man.
Well, I want to keep the secret of the God for my health's sake. I won't report and tell the world who is God, because they will laugh to death. Well, God take over the IMF, International Monetary Foundation.
The IMF take over God, you know.
Mr. God take over the International Monetary Foundation.
No, I say maybe it's IMF take over God.
Well, no problem. While you do the right thing, no problem. Anyone can be God, and I'm going to do God work. Righteousness, holiness, godliness.
So which part of Jamaica are you there?
In Negle Point.
Yard, man.
I transmit from Negle Point Lighthouse.
Yeah.
With rain.
Rain fall on there?
In the morning we have rain, and sometimes when we need sunshine, the sun come up and say hello. I wouldn't say hello to the sun, I say hail sun high. Forever. Because the sun is high and the sun never quite low. And hailing the underground world.
Yeah.
Enterprise. Hailing the underground world. The world and the God that is created on the world. And the world and you Mutabaruka. No, I see you guys universal and international. I'm very sad to say hi to you because you're doing so great. Never know that you're so educated in knowledge and wisdom and understanding. Yeah. So you make me so happy now. That is a shame.
I couldn't ashamed, man. If I make you happy, I would be ashamed.
You want to say hello to Mary?
Yes.
Hello, Muta. Say hello, Mary.
Hi, Muta.
Hi, how you do?
Yeah, I'm so happy that you're playing those tapes for people to educate what is going on about all those things, what them call conspiracy, because they are real.
Yes, definitely.
They are real.
Yeah, man.
And it's really important to make people know what goes on.
Definitely.
Because the more people know, the more something could happen.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Nice to hear from you.
Yeah, man. But we're going to see you in March. Are you going to be on the Ganja Festival?
You're going to be where?
On the Ganja Festival in Negril.
Okay.
Are you going to be there?
Supposed to.
Super, then we're going to see you.
Tell Scratch you must come at my house, man. A long time not come at my house.
Which part? Kingston?
Yes, him come up there, man. You know which part? Me don't forget now.
But he's going on tour now next week, and he will be back end of the month.
Okay.
Then we can see you in March on the Ganja Festival.
All right. Yeah,
Let me give you Lee back. Okay, bye, Muta.
Okay, give thanks.
Yeah.
Yes, Muta, you have Mary on your side 100% now. Because she hear you at 30 pints. And you're touching the pint, them explosion. The Pope who wearing frock pocket with punani.
Nobody with that, you know. Nobody with that.
Okay, forgive me.
Nobody with that, you know, scratching at the morning there, you know.
All right.
Before me lock you off.
I don't mind for the Pope have wear frock. When you should be wearing pants, you know, wear frock and something like that. And the IMF won't win, can't win, because the chosen winner, the money belongs to the devil, and the devil loses the money. And the human being must be free. 1 party and 4,000 saints must be free. So this Armageddon war, and the IMF of the Armageddon war. This Scratch Perry, Mutabaruka, and the team Jamaica must win.
Hey, Scratch.
Yeah.
You know, some of a tune when I play regular on radio where you make long time.
You know what you have to do until they give you another CD.
Eh?
Play everything what you want to play, enjoy yourself and have fun. Don't even get weaker, get stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, give thanks.
Much love.
All right.
And you can say hello to the people in the universe for me.
All right.
Because we are on top of the world. We conquer poverty and we conquer wants, we conquer needs.
Of course.
With ganja. And the government won't take away our ganja from us this time. The government won't take over our cannabis or marijuana, land bread, and say I pay them on again.
Yeah.
If they never try to do that, we give them Bigfoot. Give them big belly.
Yeah, give them Bigfoot.
And big belly.
All right, sir.
I'll give them what the Pope about in Park hide. All
right. You want to go there, so me no want to go there, so me gone. Listen to the tune I play.
Well, do that. Thank you very much.
All right, Scratch. Lee Scratch Perry. All right. At this tune, we played all the while. We played like when we are Jamaica, you know. Here we go. Yes, El.
El Mutabaruka.
Blessed man.
First, may I say happy birthday, happy New Year's, happy everything.
All right, so you too, man.
Yeah, you know. Got me a call you, but you're busy. I circle, you know, busy. Happy to talk to you. You know, the news here, yeah. But most of what going on in Venezuela.
You know, you're right.
Yeah. And I want the people of Jamaica know say there's a kind of same thing them pull up on Jamaica back in the day.
You know, the 70s.
Still suffer from right now.
You know, the 70s.
Yeah.
We just played a while ago. We just played a little clip. We just play a clip about the 70s in Jamaica, where them doing in Jamaica.
Yeah, me listen to it, man. So I have a big up joke base here, Romain Green.
Yeah, Romain. I don't meet Romain Green yet, you know. I'm going to see what I mean. I see him on picture, but I don't meet him yet.
Yeah, them youth there, I do a good job.
Do the work, of course, yeah, man.
I push the thing, you know. That, I tell you, them keep in tune.
Yeah.
But may I tell you, if we as a people stand together and stand strong for understand certain things, and I say me here, most of the youth them are Jamaica. Them think they will up my Jamaica, you know. I think the worst of Jamaica because you see everybody at Jamaica said they want to go foreign.
Yeah.
Said no matter what, if something like that up my Jamaica, it probably easier to because I see reaction when I get on the people. And most of the people don't understand and not watching and see what is going on, that any country these people put them on in it's always worse than before them come there.
Of course.
You know what I mean? Because them manipulate and they tell you, say, them going to look at opposition to put against your government, and then they're going to share your asset in half. I'm going to go in a 50% thing.
Puppet government.
Yeah, and it's that Donald Trump say, but we the people, and we get caught up in this commercial where them sell away, because everything is just an advertisement, and where them advertise to, we jump up on it and things say it go better. You know what I mean? And we have to learn to find happiness within ourselves. You know, and we have to learn to love our neighbor and love what we have. You know, as you talk about people, we are Jamaica, a farm to export and import what we need. All them things we have to look on. You know, we have to practice to feed ourselves. You know, we have to practice them little thing there. Feed yourself is very important. You know, and the youth, them have to leg off of this violence, yeah, we are killing one another for nothing. You know, everything, we just are killing one another. And now check, no, say, we are doing a job for a bigger hand. You know, because everything we are going is just a playbook them lay out. And them a play the card, them a weed them. Of course, the unseen hands, man. Yeah, you know, everything, them have the youth, them at all of the youth, them at turn, the lady, young lady, them at turn homosexual and lesbian, and is a agenda them a push. Yeah. And we just see this thing and we just think, say, oh, this thing just happens, but not just happens. No, man, it happens just because. Them orchestrated, man. Yeah, man, everything is orchestrated, and mean people hear you attack certain thing, and people that say, yeah, make trouble or whatever. They never understand where, you know, because, you know, for this thing work, all them have to do is make it seem like one and two people where you see I be successful, you know. Yeah. So you say if it seem like say a youth where we grew up with get successful, accomplish something. It's going to make we think say we can do it. And we just believe in the system. You know what I mean? They're selling this idea that anything where you think you can achieve it. Yeah, anything where you see, all you have to do is think about it. Yeah, you can get it. No go so, you know. As a baby. No, I mean, no go so. No go so at all. We don't accept that at all. Here people are saying, and I say it over and over about anything where you put your mind upon. No, you can achieve it. If that was the case, almost always why some people are so far. You have to tell them people that have put their mind on things. Yeah, you know what I mean? And then them just have and as long as them are going to make a 1 out of 500 youth where you know are going to accomplish something, you see my driver, car, nice car, or whatever, them have a nice house. We are going to try aspire for it and say, the youth, they're right there, but we don't even know so that's a part of the plan. Our day, the man, them come Oxfam send out a report, the 26 richest people in the world have more money than the bottom 50% of the whole world. I mean, I tell you, say 3 man, where they're making, 3 men in the world right now, where they're making a year can't stop hunger for the world, And the next bit where they tell the people, you know, the next thing where them sell to the people, them say to the people, them have the people I believe say, if every money that the world is up equally, within a certain amount of time, all of the money, the rich man, them will get richer back again and one. Them think they just think so them use to perpetuate certain behavior. You understand? Yeah. And the people them now understand all our little country, Jamaica, them have where look all them big bridge and them big thing that we are come. But all my great grand picnic them are gonna still pay for that when China own Jamaica. You understand? I don't think they're gonna happen. You know, but anyway, more time, I know some more people that want to talk. Still big up you, them want to East Kingston, you know. Because I want you them keep the peace and Starry, Fireball, my friend, and Beat to all of you them by West Avenue, keep the peace. Rockford, Pembroke Road, and big up on yourself and motor. One love and keep up the good work here, sir. Blessed man, give thanks. Give thanks. Yeah, man, big up yourself. Yes, cutting edge, Yes. Hello? Yeah, blessed. Hello? Yeah, man, you there, man? Yeah, Mr. Baruka? Yes, sir. Yeah, man, good night. Happy New Year, man. Happy New Year to you, too. Yeah, this is, I'm calling from Florida the second time again. Okay. Yeah, remember the last time I called you?
I told you I get the can in my knee to listen to your radio station.
You get the what?
The can. Remember I told you my grandmother use a can.
Oh, I listen to your food because you listen to me. Because you listen to me.
Yes, because I was listening
I remember you tell me that. And she passed away.
Yeah, she passed away, yes.
Yeah, I remember you, man.
Yeah. So I'm calling, get a chance to call you back again.
All right. So what you have to say?
Yeah.
Tell me what you have to say.
But what I'm saying still, I have a song I would like if you can get 2 year play for me.
Where's the song there?
I got it on YouTube. I can send it to you.
Yeah, you have to send it to me.
How can I get the information to send it to you?
Well, you'll have to call back the operator. Send it to the radio station. Send it to the radio station.
Okay, so I'm going to call the operator and get the information so I can send it to her.
Yeah, man.
Okay.
What is the song name?
I'm coming to Jamaica on Friday, though.
You come to Jamaica on Friday?
Yeah, Friday, yes.
Okay, then that's no good, man. So, what is the song name?
Yeah.
What is the song name?
Get a Life Tough.
Okay, everybody has to say that now. It's really tough for you.
Yeah, Get a Life Tough, done by Sir Justice.
Sir Justice?
Yeah, Sir Justice, yeah. Get a Life Tough.
I may look out for it.
Yeah, man, respect, man, and big up yourself and thanks for the good work, you know?
All right, give thanks.
All right.
Yes, Get a Life Tough. Albino, out of Mali. Yes, El
Muta.
I bless it, man.
Give thanks for another program, you know? Give thanks to the tape, too.
Yeah. Very interesting.
You know, this brother poet named Dingo Dingwall.
Yeah.
Him have one piece of him say something about land. And him have a line in it say, he would want to book the man who sell the first piece of land. And I brother the skill. Yeah, and really I think about it, you know, when you say somebody in the world have so much wealth.
Them pay for 1 year can stop.
Yeah. So why them Mr. Trump can't link them money for build the wall fee?
Mr. O?
Donald Trump.
You ask me that?
No, that's sure you.
You ask me that, that's not really.
But a lockdown and some little people where I barely survive, I feel I suffer without pay. Because you might basically bad up the thing.
You might hold on for them wall talk, man.
Yeah. And as a result of that, the hard working class in America, I feel it. The people that work with the government.
Not to mention now the coal at all.
No, trust me. Me, a man say, boy, and chew the hot coffee. and it come like a icy ton as it left the cup.
Yeah, man. You talk and you don't see your breath on ice.
Yeah, you did play a tune last week, Muta. It was like a assisting the local dancehall track, but appear positive lyrics, you just spit on it. And then know if a person call or ask who did the tune, and I think it is something like you tell her who sing it, like tomorrow in the Thursday program.
No, but you have to go remind me now. A Thursday, I play it on Wednesday.
You play it Wednesday night. And if the person who will call in there.
You don't know no line out tight. You don't know no line in night.
It's like she talk about some real Rastaman thing and she chop some lyrics in it. Like the voice will almost sound like Spice or one of them hardcore female DJs. You know?
I know it's who you talk.
Yeah, but tell me who.
I think she named Caramonte.
Repeat the name?
I think she named Caramonte.
The local artist?
Yeah, man. I can look for it, yeah. I look for it. A Caramonte she name.
We give thanks to the man I think on YouTube, but you know, say on a certain copyright thing, them kind of pressure them on the musical
them not take the music then.
Yeah, that kind of painful still, because you know, say me love they call it, you know, the system them from North America with them spoken word, and you know, sometimes I want to hear them again, because I really hear them think they're regular.
Yeah, true, man.
And sometimes the spelling of them name, them spell them name some special way. You can't really just type in certain things and get it so easy, you know?
Yeah, they spell it different.
Well, I must say give thanks to the program in the motor. And you have to play the tune for me, or I have to just write down the name there on YouTube. Where fish it up on YouTube. Yeah, I love the tune in the motor.
That's where she come from, you know?
Caramonte.
No, I'm going to try to figure out the right name, though.
Okay.
Yeah, Caramonte. Caramonte is the name.
I'm full jar tune from start to finish.
Eh?
Full jar tune when it play.
I think it named Fake Rasta. We are laughing.
I wish I could actually get she has stick to the topic. Remember the lyrics,
Yeah, I think I Fake Rasta. I Fake Rasta name.
And the version that highlight the marking of the road earlier, right?
Caramonte name.
I calling earlier, I talk about the lighting and the marking. And most of the time, people pay attention to the middle line, whether it's unbroken or it's broken.
Yeah, them should have put some kata in them, man.
But also, Muta, very important too, is the line on the left side of the road. Mean the one on the right, which part, you know, say the grass, mean the asphalt.
Style.
The left side need to pay attention to, especially the cross-country road, them, and the highway road, them.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, so the road like the
on the edge too much, the edge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the road around Chalk Hill, Golden Grove. The road stay bad motor.
Alright, sir.
So, man, well, we know what now, but on the further thing, we highlight them things about.
No, but I'm going to play the tune for you now. I'm going to play the tune for you.
Yeah, man, give thanks and give thanks.
Tell me if I this. So we're going to forward that's a little more from 2 to 5:45 with the stepping razor, the art of war. And with the Matrix in the house. Matrix in the house, yes.